visiting friends and relatives who lived in other big country houses. They picked up lots of ideas for making their own home more practical and comfortable. In 1820, old Lord Braybrook, Richard's father, moved to Billing Bear House in Berkshire, and Richard and Jane moved into Audley End. In the same year they had their first baby, a boy called Richard. His sister, Mirabel, was born the year after. With 2 babies and another on the way, Richard and Jane decided that Audley End needed a new nursery. The nursery was set up here, in the rooms you're visiting today. It had freshly whitewashed walls, cosy new fireplaces, and big cupboards for clothes and bedding. In 1825, Richard's father died, and he and Jane became Lord and Lady Braybrook. By 1830, there were 8 children living in the nursery. A visitor said they were fine, fair, rather noisy, and not quite in hand. They spent most of their time here, with servants, not their parents. The nursery maids washed them, dressed them, and brought them their meals, following the instructions of the governess, Miss Dormer. When this bell, just outside the nursery door, rang, it meant Lady Jane wanted to see the children in her sitting room. The children had lessons in a classroom downstairs. Miss Dormer taught all the children when they were very young. When the boys turned 8, they started having separate lessons with a male tutor. And when they were 11 or 12, they went away to boarding school at Eton College. By the 1840s, Mirabel, Louisa, and Lucy had the nursery to themselves. The girls had the rooms redecorated. They made the nursery into a pretty, comfortable, and more grown-up apartment. Lucy loved the piano and chess. Louisa was a keen botanist and even joined the Edinburgh Botanical Society. All the girls liked painting watercolours, but Mirabel's were best. When the girls were in their late teens, they started having dinner downstairs with their parents. Everyone went to the library or saloon after dinner to relax. They played cards or chess, asked each other riddles, or just sat around chatting. Soon Lucy and Louisa got married and moved to new homes. Mirabel didn't get married, but spent more time away in London. The girls and Miss Dormer were always good friends and kept in touch as they grew older. Miss Dormer sometimes went to stay with Mirabel in London. In 1858, Lord Braybrook died. Richard, the oldest of the fine, fat and fair children, and now in his 30s, became the new Lord Braybrook. His wife, Charlotte, was now Lady Braybrook. Their 2 daughters, Catherine and Mary, lived here in the nursery. Richard had become ill while serving with the army in Canada as a young man. He was not very strong and was more interested in history and archaeology than hunting and shooting, the traditional hobbies of country gentlemen. Richard had his own museum of interesting objects found in the local area, which Mirabel painted. Richard died aged just 40 in 1860. Charlotte, Catherine and Mary moved away and the house was closed up. Richard's younger brother Charles became the next Lord Braybrook. He eventually moved to Audley End in 1866 with his wife Florence and their little girl Augusta, who became the next child to live in the nursery. For a time she shared it with her cousins Catherine and Mary, who are now orphans. Augusta moved away to get married in 1879. It would be almost 40 years before there was a nursery at Audley End again. The next children to live in the Audley End nursery were Richard, George and Catherine. Their father, Henry, was Augusta's cousin. The nursery was reopened in 1918 when Richard was born. The nanny, Jessie Baby, looked after all the children. Catherine also had her own nursemaid called Joan Barker. Joan was 14 when she came to Audley End in 1935, and Catherine was 11 or 12. Joan got her own room, the old night nursery, but often slept in Catherine's room to keep her company. The children's bedrooms were across the landing. Richard and George could have had a bedroom each, but chose to share so they could use the other room as a laboratory. laboratory for making stink bombs.
This country is at war with Germany.
When the Second World War came, Richard and George went away to fight. Both of them were killed in action. Their father, Henry, died in 1941, the third year of the war. Dorothy and Catherine moved out of Audley and handed it over to the government for war work. The old day nursery became an office, where soldiers taped maps and charts to the walls. Polish volunteers trained in the house and grounds, preparing to fight an undercover war against the occupying Germans back in Poland. In 1944, hundreds of troops camped on the lawn, waiting to sail to France for the D-Day landings. After the war, Audley End was sold to the Ministry of Works. The grand state rooms were shown to visitors. Other parts of the house, like the old nursery, were closed up and almost forgotten. Until English heritage historians decided to investigate these rooms. They peered behind wallpaper, took paint samples, pored over plans and read through bundles of papers. Gradually they worked out a story of many changes, from a Victorian nursery to World War II. Finally, the rooms were redecorated to show how they looked in the 1840s, so you can enjoy them today.